Okay, Sarah, you could go to the next slide, please. So we did a survey of the OMF after the last meeting. It was in February, I think we ran the survey and asked a few questions to get a feel of feedback of what we should be covering, and what some of the organizations are doing to either reinforce or deny what we're thinking is going on. So I just did 3 sets of slides here. I don't know if you can see all the detail there, but you can get it later. The number one first question that we asked on there was, did your organization conduct hybrid meetings in 2022? And the blue is yes. And that was like 90% said yes, we had hybrid meetings. We had 6% said no, and other was 4%. So others, I won't get into that. The idea is 90% did hybrid meetings. And then we asked in question 5, will your organization conduct hybrid meetings in 2023, which we're well into now already? And still hybrid meetings, 86% said yes. Virtual meeting, 5%. So there's still going to be just strictly virtual meetings. And face-to-face, 9%. 9% is not what it used to be a few years ago. Hybrid meetings are here to stay for a while at least, and I think it's going to be more than that. Next slide, please, Sarah. Okay. The second question that we asked was, what physical environment were they conducted in? And just wanted to get an idea and a flavor of, with all these browsers and everything that are out there. And 40%, it wasn't the browser, that's the next one. The percent of the meetings were either or a rented location. 32% were conducted additionally in the organization space, an office space. Guess what we have here? And a combination of the two, obviously, that's a good answer, would be 20%. So people are holding meetings in their spaces and also renting locations still. So it's starting to open up a bit. It's not totally virtual anymore. And next slide, please, Sarah. I did this. Question was number 3 was, what virtual environment were they conducted in? And I was surprised, sort of. The blue on the left is Zoom meetings, and that's 36%. The one in the middle is Teams, and I was surprised at that. That's 35%. So Teams is becoming more and more useful. I know it's done inside corporate, because a lot of my company members in some of the committees that I have are familiar with Teams. They're not really, super slick at it. They do have them, do use them internal at least. Then the gray box in the bottom was both Zooms and Teams. It was another 5%. And then the yellow boxes GoToMeetings was 4%. That used to be a higher one, but it looks like we're not using it as much. And then the little blue on the bottom right corner, Zoom, Teams, and a combination of all 3. The blue other, and then we have WebEx, only 7%. So I know that ANSI does use WebEx, but we've been using Zoom, and that's working too. So looks like we've got to be familiar with several of the different browsers and so forth when we're attending meetings that we're not running, but Zoom seems to be doing pretty good, and Teams is something to look at. So next slide, please. So the 7th question, what are primary concerns for conducting attending or conducting hybrid meetings? And that was the reason why we came up with these panels today. The yellow on the bottom is how to integrate successful meeting, and that was 49%. So people understand you've got the two different populations, and we want to make it cohesive. So that's a challenge, and that just confirms that. The audio was 14%. So audio still persists. And I had one meeting in a nice meeting space, sort of like this, the Welding Society, American Welding Society down in Florida for the U.S. National Committee of the IEC. And we had it all around the room. Everybody was set there, well attended, 40 or 50 people, and then the rest were online. And we had gentlemen speaking from online or attempting to, and it broadcast into the room. We were hearing him absolutely fine, and he was getting horrendous echo. And so we spent the next 25 minutes to figure out how to fix the session. And all it was every time he spoke, it would come down, it would go into the microphone that was running the meeting, and it would go back up to everybody, and he would hear it. It's the echo. We weren't hearing any echo at all. But so there's surprises every minute, and maybe you can learn a few. We might come up with some today. And if you have questions, we're going to try and make it as interactive as possible with the time we have. I think that just about does it. There was one there that didn't fit in the pie chart. It said COVID restrictions, and nobody had any concern about that. So it's 0%. That's it. Thank you. Question?
It was so 27 is other. Did you have any details on that?
I can get them for you. It wasn't anything significant. It was just a little comments here and there that just added up. I was trying to find out what the remainder was. Yeah.
On the slide about which services people are using, or did you have a list for some of the other services? I was surprised to not see Google Meets on there.
I'll get, I've got the detail. I didn't bring it. Just didn't want to get down into the weeds. Just want to give you for instance, I think we had several of the major ones, and we said for other and name what it is. So, if people were familiar with it, they would have put it down. Let me ask you, do you use that? Okay. Good. Well, thank you. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can go on to this whole session now, right? So we're moving on to item 4 in the agenda, hybrid meetings, Ed? OMF experiences. What's that?
Ed, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just was thinking as we were talking about how the activity level is going up in some areas and some other organizations is declining, and the diversity of smaller participants, which is also quite extensive in terms of width. Is there something that ANSI should think about doing to create organizational processes? I'm not saying we're going to create solutions which are permanent and fixated, but flexibility, but start supporting perhaps the elements that each of the successful organizations are bringing to the table and are getting reception on. Maybe we can start creating some sort of a set of guidelines. We can even develop a small standard which gives us the variations of the type of steps that we can take. Of course, leave that flexible because things will change over time, and start creating perhaps consistency so we don't have to shuffle every time we have a unique new facility that we're going to be operating through. I'm not sure if there's an appetite for that because it's a very complex and difficult issue, but somebody's got to start creating as much alignment as possible, especially for similar type of activities like standards development organizations. So it could be specialized for that type of group, and others could try to do the same thing for their community of activities.
Yeah, Joe.
Just a wild idea.
It is. We could do Sharon can probably bring it up in her session. Just
I won't be
what
there, but I
we
wanted to pass that on
yeah
to you.
no what we were doing. We brought these and had these webinars and so forth to try and bring forth what is out there. And you will agree, I'm sure, that just over the last couple of years, these services like Zoom has really taken off with additional bells and whistles, and Teams has popped up in the environment from a different direction, and come up
I was
with
surprised that
great.
WebEx is only 7%.
I know,
thought
I
it would
was
be
too.
more.
Too. And so the idea is that we're just trying to make people aware of what is out there and trying to keep up with some of the new options. And I think, if there's breakout, we heard breakout rooms mentioned, and it's available in Teams, I know, and in Zoom and probably WebEx also. So now breakout is a option in a lot of these. So we're starting to see the competition in the marketplace there is actually bringing the quasi early rudiment ingredients for standards or some guides. So I think I'm going to hand it over to Sharon, Director of Standards of the American Dental Association. Sharon did such a great job at our last session that she came back after we begged and pleaded and asked her to do it again, because she did a fine job. So no money changed hands. No. So Sharon, I'd like to hand it over to you. Thanks, everybody.
Good luck, Sharon. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Joe. We'll look forward to your comments as we go.
I won't be
As
here
long as you
that
can
long,
stay.
but I wanted to
Okay.
get started and listen. Saw your
All right.
face. That's good.
All right, welcome everyone, and it's nice to be back again. We've had many workshops on this, and I hope today we'll have, the goal is to be interactive as possible. And so what we have done is we've asked 4 of our OMF members, we're going to have them give us a brief overview of what their practices is as far as hybrid meetings. And the most fun part of the meeting is we're going to hear from you. And as you see the Slido poll, if you haven't, those of you online and those of you in the room, please make sure to, here's your opportunity now to have your voice heard. So you go to slido.com or scan the QRC code, and we will look forward to hearing that. So no further ado. Okay. We have 2 in person and 2 virtual today. And actually, well, yes, it is. It's a perfect hybrid. We have half and half. All right. Okay. So I'm assuming that Brandon's slides are queued up next first, correct?
They don't have slides, we're just gonna talk.
Oh, awesome. That's even better. Yes, yes. Okay, so instead of having audio, we have video issues today. So that's our, it's always something. I do a little song and dance for you, but you probably don't want to hear me sing. So.
Just start.
Okay, let me just start. All right. Actually, even better, let's on the phone. I'm going to have our first panelist, Diana Jones. She's Senior Director of Technical Programs and Development for the International Safety Association. And Diana, will you share for a few minutes your practices?
Hi, everybody. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay. I'm not able to turn on my video, so I don't know if you can see me or not, but my name is Diana Jones, And I am the standards technical director for the International Safety Equipment Association. And I've been there for about a couple of years now, and I joined them at the tail end of the whole COVID thing. And we just kind of fully embraced the hybrid meetings when I started. And, before that, right, everything was in person, right? It just, it was things got done more effectively. So, when we started doing the virtual and then moving to the hybrid meetings, our challenges were kind of like that participation, right? We've got the people in the room that are engaged and participating, and some of the people that are online who are just trying to either listen in or not, or might be afraid to to speak up, or even to jump into the conversation, right, that's going on within the room. So that's kind of like one of the challenges that we've been trying to overcome over the past year and a half, is how do we get that full engagement with everybody? I'm not saying that what we do is perfect or not, but it's something where we find that we have to particularly pay attention to the people that are online, and give them an opportunity to speak up, right? And join that conversation that's happening within the room, right? So I think it's more having, we've got multiple people that are managing the meeting as well. So we're using the chat a lot to engage the people that are online, to kind of trigger them to jump into the conversation. So we're trying to fully embrace the technologies that are out there to bring in the voice of the people that are online. So that's some of the things that we're working with currently.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Next, I'm going to introduce Brandon Abley, the Director of Technology of NENA, the 911 Association. So Brandon.
Hi, I'm Brandon Abley, Director of Technology at NENA. Yep.
And now we have another one, a video challenge. So that's two now. We've had two.
Do we need more gain on the mic, or should I just get closer?
Can you try again, Brandon?
Okay, test 1, 2.
Can everyone hear Brandon on the line?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead, Brandon.
All right, so beginning again, Brandon Abley, Director of Technology at the 911 Association. And one of my key roles is to oversee technology standards development at NENA, which are the standards that govern how 911 works across the Americas, in partnership with Europe. Hopefully you never need to use our technology, right? Because I hope you never need to dial 911. But if you do, in part, you have us to thank. It's working. So I know that we'll get into specific marks, but one of the reasons ANSI asked me to come in and speak at this seminar is that actually our experiences with hybrid meetings have been very poor. Even though they're popular and people always request a hybrid option, we always run into some combination of audio or video issues, because our meetings are for standards developments, like, most of us here. We have sort of a second class attendee, in a way. When people are remote, they have a harder time joining the discussion. They might not get noticed. They can't stand up and shout at someone in the room telling them they're a stupid idiot. Which happens all the time. I say this as an engineer, but engineers are jerks. And we have a lot of engineers that volunteer for our organization. So we've actually, for the most part, we've put more or less a ban on having a remote option for our in-person meetings. A key caveat to that is that our standards development community, I have my colleague Sandy in here that can correct me, but we have something like 40 meetings a week or something, with all of our different work groups. So our attendees have a lot of time to engage virtually, which makes the need for a hybrid session less necessary, because there's always going to be another virtual meeting for the same topic coming up. one of the things we've done is where we'd move to a hybrid meeting for an annual joint committee meeting. We've split that up into every 6 months. One is in person and one is fully virtual. And we expect to have better outcomes there. But all the same, you know, in the like kind of post-COVID transition, we had a remote option for a lot of attendees. If nothing else, people couldn't come to the US meetings, right? And we have a lot of international partners and a ton in Canada, for example, and they're just not allowed to enter the United States when we started having in-person meetings again. So I'll pause for questions on specific, but that's just sort of overview. And Nina's experience with hybrid meetings through 01 and 02.
Hey, thank you, Brandon. And we'll get to questions, and we got a lot of questions for the panelists. Be very busy. So we'll look forward to your answers for that. We have Tom McGarry, the Vice President of Standards for the Telecommunications Industry Association. Tom?
Thank you, Shannon. Sharon, sure. Everybody here?
On the phone, can you hear Tom?
You guys can switch mics.
Hello? Yep,
Okay,
that's better.
all right, we have two for
Sorry
audio.
about that. So yes, hi, my name is Tom McGarry. I'm VP of Standards at Telecommunications Industry Association, TIA. This is actually my first job as working for a standards development organization. I started during pandemic. I've always worked with standards development organizations, but I've never actually worked for a standards development organization. So I have a little bit of a different perspective. For the first year and a half of my job, were no meetings, no face-to-face meetings. Everything was virtual. I didn't have any need to understand how to develop, how to put together face-to-face meetings, and much less hybrid meetings. Luckily, I have a great staff with lots of experience. I have multiple committees that I manage, and they do things differently. Some now are solely face-to-face. They don't allow a hybrid option. Some have only hybrid options. Some are still solely virtual. Interestingly, none of them alternates between the two. None of them has a virtual meeting followed by a hybrid meeting. So they've just sort of settled into you know, their the way they want to operate. You know, I figured I'd share a story with one of our committee meetings. We had a hybrid meeting beginning of the year. By the way, as happens always, there is some kind of an AV issue within the first
Been there.
day. And on this particular day, one of the things that happened was we lost internet. So we lost everybody that was remote for a little while. The 15 minutes, it came back, everybody was fine. But the committee tracked me down during a break and said, oh my goodness, what happens to quorum if we lose everybody, if you lose internet? And you know, there's you know, 2/3 of the people are gone, what happens to quorum? I thought it was a good question. Probably not one precedent. It's not the first time we've had remote participants in meetings. We've had speakerphone meetings for decades, of course. And sure enough, you know, when looking through what do we do and talking to my general counsel about how do we deal with things like that, there's actually a rich history of you know, directions from ANSI, even in TIA documentation that says, you know, chairs, by the way, have a lot of control. And you know, if they have a big vote coming up, they should check where quorum is. Do they still have quorum? You know, it recommends. You know, if there's a big vote and somebody who they suspect is important to the vote is not there, maybe they should hold off and delay the vote. So it didn't seem like too big of an idea, too big of an issue to me, but I will tell you that the chair was obsessed, and nothing that I said to him satisfied him. And I guarantee you it will come back at their meeting in June. So figured I'd share a little bit of experience I had. That's it's probably not over yet. But thank you, Sharon. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, I never thought, the internet was a good one because that's a problem that I've had happen too. The last panelist is Peter Portella, the Director of Standards Development for the American Welding Society, and Peter is on the phone.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Happy to be here and happy to be able to talk a little bit about AWS's journey and my involvement in it. So I've been at AWS for about 8 years now, and I got to see the beginning of what would become our hybrid meetings. So we used GoToMeeting sparingly. So it was not primarily most of our standards meetings were done in person in a room for multiple days, as everybody's done. And you just kind of go 8 to 5, take a lunch break and keep going. Now, we were already dabbling in some of the virtual meetings when the pandemic hit, but obviously the pandemic really expedited everything. We use some GoToMeeting, we use some WebEx, and we use some Adobe Connect. And when the pandemic hit, kind of there were like issues, and we really wanted to give our volunteers, primarily our standards volunteers, but ultimately org-wide, a uniform experience. So we became a Zoom organization for all external meetings. And as the year and years went on, we really tried to focus on how to use these tools to really have the best possible experience and even change our own internal workflows to make sure that hybrid meetings were more accessible to the volunteers. A lot of people were, kind of near the end of their careers, let's say. They said, you know what, even as travel was opening up, I really like doing this from my couch. I really don't want to travel in for 2 days. And we really got to the point where I would say most of our committee meetings are about 50-50, some even closer to 60-40 virtual. And we committed as an organization that firstly, all of our standards meetings are hybrid moving forward. And it really has permeated a lot of our other meetings as well. That's not to say that everything's perfect, right? So there are challenges. One, we are an organization that has done a lot of meetings at hotels, for example. Costs have gone up. You can't always control bandwidth at hotels. So we've tried to, one, create our own list internally of places that work and places that don't. Second, work with hosted organizations. So maybe colleges or universities or companies that want to host an AWS meeting and, have some sort of partnership there. Then we've really, by streamlining everything through Zoom, we make sure that the volunteers don't have to learn 6 or 7 different platforms, right? So we saw the slide earlier that some people use Teams, Zoom, WebEx. Well, we had a lot of frustrations coming from volunteers like, well, the button's here for Teams, but it's over there for Zoom. I can share this way, but I can't share that way. My audio doesn't recognize. So that's really helped us. Internally, I will say we still use Teams. So that's something we still discuss. I think it was Ed earlier that mentioned he had a meeting at AWS headquarters a few months ago and the audio issues there. Yeah. And honestly, as you move forward, that's one of the challenges is marrying old technology with new. So some of the analog technology in the meeting rooms doesn't always play well with kind of the new digital technology. And I'm happy to say that we've come a long way. There's always room for improvement. There will always be new technology, but I am really happy about our commitment to making sure that no matter who you are, you can always connect to an AWS meeting because it's really helped our volunteer experience overall.
Thank you, Peter. Very good. And I'm hearing some common themes. And how I'd love the rest of the panel to progress today is we have a series of questions on the Slido poll. Does everyone have an opportunity to download the poll? Okay, from what we're going to do is do the question, and then I'll ask our panelists if they'd like to comment on that, and then I'll ask any questions from the audience. But we have about 9-10 questions I'd like to try to get through today. So I get to play a game show host now. So, all right. So the survey says organization video on or video off. And it looks like we have a 90%. Can't see this. Blocking. We have another video. I'm keeping track of our things that are happening today. So I think it's 90%. 90% is video. And the question, the reason why I asked for this question to be on there, because I had read recently an article, and it said that our previous speakers were talking about engagements, people feeling like second-class citizens, having a uniform experience. This article is very interesting. It said with video on, it helps people stay engaged instead of having, multitasking, you're out doing laundry while you're listening to the meeting and such. And so this way, the people are engaged if you have the video on. But on the other hand, it said that Zoom fatigue increased dramatically because the people on the video have to look at someone all the time versus when you're eating, you're not constantly having that eye contact and looking, and the fatigue factor came up. So with that, I'll ask my panelists, and I'm not going to pick on anyone in any particular order, but Tom, what do you think as far as video on or video off?
So I think, by the way, when you say both, I think that means it's up to you,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we always do. And I typically find, I don't know, something like maybe 10 to 15% of the people will leave their video on and the rest off. Typically, which I think is a good thing. If people speak, they turn it on. And that I think is a good thing. But yeah, it's your choice.
Okay, Peter, how about you?
We are pretty much your choice. A lot of our committee members have really kind of leaned into it. And we often get visits from, pet cats and dogs, and it always adds a little bit of levity to the committee meeting, but we don't force it. We kind of let it happen organically. I think a lot of people, when they present or when they are the active speaker, they will naturally turn on their video. But aside from that, they'll probably turn it off.
Okay, Brandon.
Yeah, we don't have a specific, I've got to get closer. We don't have a specific rule. It's a big cultural thing though, because we've been doing, for our work groups, a weekly meeting for years. I forget the name of the tool that we used to use, but it was super cutting edge at the time because you could stream editing a document live, and then people would phone. Cutting edge back in like 05, kind of old hat. So our membership is just kind of used to that. Funny thing is though, once we switched to Zoom, we have like literally 3 people that insist on having their video on, which is just sort of odd if no one else has it on. So they're like 3 men. I'm looking at their face, half the day, all day long. The funny thing with us though is that as people got used to from home and multitasking, as you're saying, people would sometimes accidentally turn on their videos. I have seen colleagues on the toilet that I never thought that I would witness in my entire life. But after some growing pains, people got a bit more used to it. But I think that's culture and history that we just are used to mostly audio with their eyes on the document.
Okay. And last but not least, Diana.
Hi, so we are, it's up to them, right? But what I find is that, depends on what our committees are working on, right? And how close knit the committee is. I have some
Yeah, I was gonna
that
say.
everybody's got their video on. We all want to see each other. We all want to talk to each other beforehand. How's everybody doing? It's the video on is great. And then other ones, they're a lot of new people, or just kind of, they're not comfortable as a working group yet, and most people will have their videos off. And then most of the time, if we're sharing documents right on the screen, then people turn off their videos, because they'll do that just because they think it helps the bandwidth and all all of that kind of stuff. And that way it eliminates the distractions from the videos going on at the same time as we're, as we're trying to like edit a document or something like that on the shared screen. So yeah, so that's kind of what we're seeing. We don't have a requirement one way or the other.
Okay, in a few seconds, I'm going to have Michelle read some of our comments online. I know one of the things that we have to take in consideration too with the video on is the bandwidth of the meeting. So if you have too many people on video, your meeting, so that's another thing. But one thing that, for example, for us, when I have a staff meeting, I have asked my staff to video on just so we can see each other, so we feel connected and feel like part of a team versus when you're off, you don't really feel like you're engaged. Unfortunately, I still have to get up and do my hair and makeup every day because I have a lot of meetings that they require. I have to be on video. And so my husband's asked me, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm getting ready for work. And you're just getting ready for the video for the day. Okay, Michelle, go ahead.
So one comment, Kenji, the purpose of the meeting may dictate whether one's video is on or off. If it's primarily to review, edit a document, we don't need to see faces. For pure discussion, video on helps deliver that message. Paul, I am having some home repair going on here, so my video is off. No one needs to see my expression every time an air nailer fires. Gary, if we are hosting online courses, we require the students to keep the video on. Mealy, for first time meetings or one time only meetings, I keep video on since we are introducing ourselves. For recurring meetings, I keep video off. I find the engagement is much higher when the video is on though. Most of my CB members, committee, consensus body. Oh, thank you. Learned something new. Keep video on, which is great. Since I'm sharing my screen and looking and coordinating multiple screens, most of the time video is off is best for her. Kat, video off can also be seen as an accommodation for some people's needs. And then excellent point, the fact that video eats bandwidth.
Yeah. Okay. On the oh, go ahead.
Dan, that's on top. At ASTM, we have found that the hotels do have a big impact on the success of a meeting. Some are just not really equipped, and it seems like hotels would prefer not to perfect hybrid meetings, so it encourages people to come in person.
Very good. Anyone in the room? Anyone like to share in the room? Okay. Now, one of the things though, and Ed, this was brought up, how we do meetings has changed because we don't introduce ourselves anymore. We used to always introduce ourselves. And so when you go to, if you're new, it's very difficult to know who someone is, especially if you haven't, you've been talking to this person for years, but you've never seen their face. So, you're constantly trying to sneak a peek at the name badges because you don't know who they are. And then the other thing is the lack of, do you have any objections? No more, do I have a motion to approve? Do we have a second? Do we have a lack of objections? The formats of meetings it's all changed. And so it's a new era that we're going into. Okay, so now the next question is the ideal length of a hybrid meeting. 2 hours, 2 to 4, more than 4 hours. And then on type of meeting. One of the questions, yes. Okay. I'll give you a few minutes. Ding, ding, ding. All right. Very exciting. We're just watching it live here.
Sharon, just to note that we did at the last meeting as well, is we just included the results of this just as an attachment to the meeting.
All right,
report, so
very good. Awesome. Okay, so yes, I think depending on the type of meeting. Oh, it's still moving. Good.
Yeah, but not at the bottom.
More than 4 hours. I agree on that. That is just cruel to anyone that's been on more than hours. hotel moving. Oh my goodness. Okay, so obviously it's dependent on the type of meeting. And as we heard from the audience too, it's if you have students you want to engage, whether you're having a committee meeting, whether you're having just a report out meeting, that does, and where the location too. You know, if you're in a hotel that has terrible bandwidth, then you probably don't want to be on that very long. So depending on the type of meeting, 48%, under 2 hours, 31%, 2 to 4. Nobody wants more than 4 hours. Okay, so the next question is, this is a good one. What's the best time? Okay, so let's say the best time nationally right now. Can I do it twice? No?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to do
We-
it
I-
twice.
Sarah, can you show the next one? So
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do right now, just if I can do it twice nationally. Okay. All right. All right, here we go. It has international in there, so we don't have to do it. Okay. Yeah. So we're having, I think we see it recurring that it's whoever's hosting the meeting, that's the time zone of the meeting. And so if you're in the United States and you happen to be in Japan, it's stinks for you because you have to get up in the middle of the night and vice versa. So again, I think I've seen as best practices has been whoever the host is, but you're right, there is no good time for it. It's extremely difficult. And I see we have morning is 40%, afternoon 29%, and then again, no good time. So do we have any comments from the panelists? Let's see, let's start this time with Brandon.
Yeah, most of our attendees are in North America, so we have like up to 4 or 5 time zones, depending on what in Canada and Mexico where they are, and daylight saving time status, which is not observed everywhere. But yeah, we can't find a perfect time just between the East and West Coast. And it's not always fair to just say, well, the host is an early riser in DC, so we have it at 8 a.m. So then people on the West Coast, have to go to bed at 4 in the morning. So we try to shoot for around the middle of the day as much as we can. Our colleagues in Europe can call in later at night. So funny anecdote about Japan, though. We don't have any volunteers working from Japan, but we have done some work with Japanese companies. And they will not meet at night. I don't know why. So it's always us at some ungodly hour that has to accommodate them, even though they want our advice. Right? They invited us. But maybe that's just a cultural thing.
Diana.
So ISEA, we've got members, all over North America, and then a few in Europe as well. So we find that that it's kind of early afternoon, from 12 to 3, is a good time to meet with, to get the most attendance, right? The most people, the availability, and so it's hard. Sometimes I find, just myself, if I'm doing one-on-one meetings with someone on the West Coast, we might be able to find a time to do it together where it's 6 p.m. on the East Coast, right? So I find that, and it's not just me, the other people that I'm speaking with as well, we're all starting to adjust our work times and our work schedules, right? If we're, sometimes I've got meetings with people on the West Coast and they're like, yeah, 6 a.m. is fine. I'm like, are you sure? But for me, I'm more of a night person. If someone wants to, I'll meet with somebody at 8 p.m. at night, right? So it's, on the East Coast and it's, 5 over there on the West Coast. So I think, what's happening is that our work schedules are adjusting as well, is what I'm finding out, from just talking to our members. Which I don't know if that's a whole other discussion there, was that work-life balance as well, because we're all many of us are working from home and we're traveling a lot. So that's another good discussion probably to have.
Thank you.
So if we're talking about hybrid meetings, meaning there
Yes.
are people in place, people together in a room, I can't imagine you wouldn't do it at the local time. Would you schedule it from noon to 8 for people who are in the room? Doesn't make any sense. But virtual meetings, if they're truly virtual, I did want to say that when I started, everything went virtual, right? All of a sudden it just, it was like a flick of a switch. And with international meetings, that meant people, rather than traveling somewhere and getting up at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, they were waking up at 3 in the morning and working from 3 to 10. Quite frankly, I think that's it's unfair, to be honest with you, to the people themselves. And I guess one more thing I'll add on to it is organizations get pretty used to not paying for travel. That's a real great thing. If you haven't been paying for travel for 2 years, why would I bother fund it for this coming year? We've ruined everybody's evenings, ruined everybody's day already. So why not continue to do it for the rest of the time?
All right. And then we'll hear from Peter.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a right time. We have a lot of committee meetings that are on the longer side. So those we try to start closer to 9 o'clock. That way, if there are Eastern time, between 9 and 10, trying to be more accommodating of people on the West Coast, which there are a lot of committee members. Asking somebody to wake up at 5 is not great. It's a little more acceptable to say between 6 and 7. That's been good for us. Shorter meetings, they're kind of peppered throughout the day, and it really is up to the individual program manager to manage that with their committee. But I think we found a good balance for pretty much all of the groups that we interact with.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have Michelle read the comments from online. However, while she's doing that, can you bring up the next word cloud, Sarah? I'm going to have you do your word cloud while Michelle is reading the comments. Okay.
Thanks, Sharon. So yes, I was getting texts like, oh my God, the chat, everybody's in the chat talking about this. As a West Coaster, the East Coast morning meetings are tough, says Heather. Patricia, typically meetings around lunch hour help both those with the East and West Coast. Some people said that was a great idea. For North America, I scheduled in the afternoon here on the East Coast whenever possible. That was Jean. 8 to 9 a.m. U.S. Central Time, we can get maximum attendance in the U.S. and internationally. Gary, when doing audits of international companies, we have our auditors hold meetings to accommodate. Richard, I'm happy to say we have hosted, communicated, and engaged attendees in all EU time zones, UK, UAE, China, and it does not accommodate everyone, but those who need to attend find a way to attend. Anthony, we have participants from both Europe, East Coast and West Coast. We try to flex start and end times to accommodate each group. Someone is always upset about the time. Sally, in my experience, Michael in Japan attend Zoom meetings in their offices. Meetings can be in the evening in Japan, make it for them to attend. Rachel, we sometimes have meetings, US folks gather in a single US location. Europeans gather in one location in Europe. So Europe will meet 1 to 9 and the US will be 8 to 4 and has well to have 2 rooms of folks and less Zoom IT issues. It's good, interesting. Margaret, we start our meetings at 10, 7 meetings after 3 Central.
I like that one.
I think I got most of that. Yep. That's the end.
Okay. So anybody from the room, go ahead. You can introduce yourself so they can,
Am I on now?
yes.
Megan Hayes from NEMA. I think it depends on whether you're considering it as a fully hybrid meeting or an in-person meeting with a remote participation. Because in a fully hybrid mode, to make sure you're accommodating as many people as possible. If you're scheduling an in-person meeting and you're participation, you're always going to favor timing for those that are traveling to that person meeting.
Anybody else in the room? Okay, go ahead. I think he needs a microphone.
Hi, Chris Dubay, NFPA. Just to build on what Megan said, I think up in just calling it a hybrid meeting, I think, okay, what's the workload? Side, working with the chairs, or is it an in-person meeting or is it going to be a virtual meeting? And then if we have an in-person meeting, then we provide the remote hybrid option for those that want to attend. So really it's driven by the workload. I think businesses and stakeholders and consensus body members have gotten in the mode of, if you can't justify travel, don't have a hybrid meeting because I'm not going to travel. So if you got a full day, probably more than a full day, 2 days, 3 days of work, have an in-person meeting. If it's a day or less, let's do a short virtual meetings. So I think it's a combination of efficiency play, but ultimately it's driven, it should be, in our view, driven by the workload, what that task group or committee is facing.
Anybody else in the room? Okay, go ahead.
Chris Carnahan, Aerospace Industries Association. Sharon, I've seen a couple of more on the ISO side of things where there's this rotating schedule for a hybrid meetings where even the people who are face to face are meeting like one morning, and then the next day they meet in the afternoon, and then the next day they meet in the middle of the night to accommodate people who are not there. So it's a necessary evil, I think, for some of the international meetings, because you have, for me in particular, running an ISO committee for drone standards. You know, it was like, oh, things were great because on the East Coast it was morning. The Europeans always get the best time because we're always meeting in my early morning, their nice afternoon, and then in Asia, of course, then Australia joins.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, now we have to start doing the
Those poor
rotating.
souls.
Somebody's going to pay, somebody's going to meet in the middle of the night every other meeting. So
Very good. Okay, so from our word cloud, we have chair availability, host location, number of attendees, from major availability, chair preference, hosts balanced. And then again, the next question will take up some of this. And from the room, we've heard the goal of the meeting, the workload, and what you're trying to do. And then, of course, the rotation of schedules. So now the next one, being that such a challenge, how do you determine what that sweet spot is as far as when you have the meeting? And that's our next poll. I feel like I should do something here. We're waiting. Just, I need my little mute, but I can't sing, so you don't want to hear that. So actually, I'm going to ask the panelists while we're waiting for this. All right, this time we're going to start with Peter. How do you determine what that sweet spot at time?
We have historically been an organization that uses doodle polls, but as the tools have gotten better, we started using Google Forms for kind of sending out something that's a little bit easier to digest. And then somebody on the team found out that in Outlook now, there's a really robust scheduling portion of it. So you can actually create this really great scheduling email, and it'll block the choices the person selects in their calendar as tentative until the poll closes, and then it'll clear out the old ones. And that's been really nice. We're kind of toying with it. The less external platforms we use, the better. And I think that's been people's challenges overall as we have been adjusting to a lot of the new digital space is there's a tool for everything and there's an external app for everything. So now that there's a million ways to do it, we're trying to come back into doing it just with one or two pieces of software.
Hey, Tom.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay, it's on. The-
Yes. Well, as I said, we,
How do you determine that time?
if people are in a room, they're gonna start at the local time,
Okay.
8 a.m., 9 p.m. 9
That's
a.m.,
easy.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. And Diana.
Yeah, you know what, what Peter said is kind of like exactly what, what we do. We've got the doodle polls that, we'll send out, if we're trying to schedule something, ad hoc. But what we've done with our association and our committees is that we've planned them out for the rest of the year, depending on, to Chris's point, thank you for bringing up that workload ish thing with Chris, because we've looked at what what the committees are working on this year, and we've planned those out through the year, so they're regularly scheduled. But in order to be able to do that, we started off with polls and so forth as to what was the best week of the month, and best time of day, and so forth. And like, to Peter's point, the technology, right? There's so many neat little tools out there. That's another thing that we're trying to narrow down on, which is the best one and the most efficient one to use when doing that type of scheduling.
Hey, last Brandon.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in my introduction, for like the standards development committees that we have, we kind of put the kibosh on hybrid meetings. But that's justified in part by the very high number of virtual meetings that they have every week, right? But the functions that we maintain a hybrid meeting for, we just rely on the local time, where people have come to town. That just makes sense. And the CEO's in California that day, that's his problem, right? He has to wake up early. But it really depends on the host location. We try to compromise, but when 90 people to a place, it's kind of, we don't go out of our way to accommodate those few that haven't come.
Yeah. Okay, and I know one of the things from the word cloud doodle poll, and now let's say raise of hands. How many hate when you get a doodle poll and there's 30 choices? Do you know how hard it is to go through your calendar to find those 30 choices to say yes or no? So what I've said for my staff, I said the max it can allow is like 8. That's because then it doesn't, because it's that flipping through, trying to write down all the dates and the times. It's really hard when you have an electronic calendar to figure out what those availability, when that availability is. So okay, we'll do that, Ed, then I'll go through them.
Yeah, when that occurs, I will do, if there are 30 choices, I will go offline, come back in later when more people have selected. And then I'll pick the best of those, and click once.
Like that. I'm gonna have to remember that one. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Megan Hayes from NEMA again. One of the things that we've done with our staff is to encourage them to also limit the amount of time doodle polls are in, because I can respond to one and forget that I responded to it minutes later and skip over all the available time. So
yes,
we tend to ask them to close the polls in 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. Okay. Online. We have lots. This created a lot of angst for people. I can see.
Doodle poll can, Doodle poll can sync with your calendar, so you don't have to do that. But I know you can, but it's not easy. So
Yeah.
I get that.
That's technology.
If a doodle is open too long, I'm fine my availability to change. It gets worse when the organizer does a doodle poll, but then doesn't schedule the meeting for some time after. But I just went as Michelle from somebody who does this at ANSI. Peter, that I'm really intrigued by that Outlook, that you can use that to do that, and it holds time on people's calendars, and then it will take them away when the meeting schedule. That's really intriguing and interesting to me. So I will have to look it up.
Okay, any other comments online? Or Brandon, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I kind of hate when I receive a dual poll at all. But when we do have to send one out, we just kind of make a judgment call and just choose like 3 spots. Doesn't matter if staff has like 30 slots available, because that's just pain to everybody, right?
Oh, yeah, I don't like Mr. Dool.
I have another.
Okay,
comment.
go ahead.
Should all participants be treated equally? Should those who made the effort to be in person have greater priority in discussions than those who do not? We like to think all are equal, but in-person conversations are much more effective and efficient. Should hybrid meetings give priority to those in the room? This means there's a benefit to attending in person and a consequence to being remote.
That's interesting. And that's, I mean, one of our comments was to, treat everyone equally on the phone as second-class citizens. So it's kind of, yeah, it is a challenge. Go ahead.
Still more. Hold on. They're coming in. What's the name of the Outlook tool that Peter referred to? I thought he just said Outlook. That's all I heard. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
what is it?
So it's actually part of Outlook. It's called scheduling poll, and you can access it from either a message or a meeting. So it doesn't just have to be a meeting. It'll open up a tab and you can add people, both people that are in your organization. It'll show their calendars in real time, and external individuals.
Oh,
What platform is that, Peter? Is that
Not-
just for?
Not sponsored. It's
It's
part of scheduling poll. So when you open up a new email or a meeting, it'll be on the top right for Outlook
Right.
365.
Was worth my trip today just to learn that. Okay.
There you go.
All right, go ahead.
Dan Smith says, does anyone virtual participants pay?
Ooh. I've had meetings where you have to pay if you're attending a conference. You don't get the lunch, so you get the payments a little bit less, but you still have to pay. Brandon?
Yeah, that's exactly what we've started considering too for future events. Because we have to run an event. You
Yeah.
have to pay for Wi-Fi at the hotel, which for some reason is $85,000. So the virtual participants for some events, we looked at having like a smaller fee, but some fee, and all we need to pay our salaries and their resources consumed by not being in the room.
Any other comments?
Another consideration is how many people absolutely must be accommodated. For example, you have a consensus voting bodies with over 100 members, but only 50% of them have voting status. Those people get the preferential treatment for scheduling, and agree with the philosophy of encouraging people to attend in person. The productivity benefit is incalculably higher. Somebody said, I believe the function is called Find Time in Outlook. And then there's a link in the chat, somebody on how to create Find Time poll. So we will also take the meeting chat from the Zoom and also send it out. We'll take off the, hi, I'm here. I can't hear things out of that chat, but
Okay,
helpful. So we'll keep.
there you go. Okay, so now, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
He's from Nima again. Am I on? Yeah. So the question about whether you treat in-person people with, more benefit than online, I think it also depends upon the type of meeting. If you're hosting a meeting where there are voting rights involved, then the people that are virtual need to be able to participate in the discussion. We then ask everybody that's in the meeting, whether they're remote or in person, to sign on to the virtual meeting and then use raise hand or chat feature to manage the discussion to make sure that there's nobody, overwhelming the discussion because they're in person and the chair can't see them. There's a speaking queue and everybody gets in line, and that's how we manage that. I think for other meetings where they're more discussion based and perhaps not as focused on voting rights, then Bruce's point makes sense that in-person participation might get a bit of boost just because they're being seen in the room.
Yeah, and one advantage of having people online is that when you have someone that takes over the conversation, you can hit them on mute. And then you could just say, you know, "I'm sorry, we can't hear you." And so then it gives equal opportunity to other people in the room. Now, this next one is I don't know if we can do two here, but let's start with the first one. The biggest challenges for hybrids, and again, this is a word cloud. Love the word clouds. One of the things I'm just going to share briefly what happened to us, and you talked a little bit about it, Brandon. We're asked to host a ISO meeting next year in New Orleans, and we got just for our meeting, and it was $147,000. Last year, when we were supposed to have the meeting pre-pandemic, and it was 100,000 for the whole meeting. So now our E is, you know, much more, and then you add another 100,000 for the other things, and so now it's getting to its cost to host the meetings because of that. But then a lot of that also is, I dug into the quote. A lot of that is the equipment rental, having the microphones. It's not the support. Support was only about 23,000 on the hybrid part. It's just when you're in the meeting room like such, people on the phone can't hear you unless you have a microphone. So again, you can have a perfect hybrid, but it's how much money you throw at it. And that's, I'm finding the best experience. We had a great one recently, but it was very expensive. We had to have in-person support in our rooms. And again, the cost of the equipment rental for the microphone. So I'm going to hear the biggest challenges. Now I'm going to hear from my panelists. Tom, you get to start this one out.
So yeah, I think I'll repeat what you said is microphones, which is really bizarre. Turned out we had a meeting a few months ago, and what I wanted to do was set up microphones that people on stands that people could queue, and queue. I've been to standards meetings myself, and I actually find it quite convenient because the chairs don't have to keep track of who's raised their hand and when they raise their hand, and it's someone speaking before so-and-so, they're in line. But the people hated it. They just couldn't stand it. They wouldn't actually do it. They wouldn't get up and go to the microphone. One of the things was that they would read off the laptop. So it's, hey, I got to read off my laptop. So we sort of changed people run around the room, handing out microphones, and microphones are expensive. As you know, they're the what he said that they want to have, the push talk microphones, 2 people. Go to the meeting, half the tables aren't full. There's no one on them. There's entire tables that are empty. And you mean we're going to put like 8 microphones on there?
Yeah.
Anyhow, microphones, and of course a close second is AV.
Okay, Anna.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, I had just
your biggest challenge.
Yeah, the biggest so for us, it's I think we have all different types of meetings. We have small hybrid meetings, but right now we're so with the small ones, we can manage that with equipment, right? Whether either our own equipment, or if I'm if I'm traveling and we have got a meeting off site, but it's still hybrid. I've got, our association has purchased these owls, right? And we use those for a certain size. And, so those work fantastic because they've got the integrated microphone and the camera, and it adjusts around the room, the video, whoever's speaking. So those actually work fantastically. And, and I can't remember what the size of room that it will manage, but we're trying to schedule, our annual meeting, which is happening in December, which, we've got these huge rooms. You're talking about, 50 to 75 people around, around the room. And, my finance person is like, the cost of AV, she's looking at me like, you can't do it. I'm like, what do you mean I can't do it? I have to do it, so we're struggling with the cost of that technology when we're going to the hotels as well. And someone had brought up before that, about charging people, right? When does it come to a point where all right, we've added all this new technology in there, this new accessibility of doing something hybrid that, when do we say that, yeah, you know what, if you are going to participate hybrid, there is a fee associated with that because we do need to, maintain that technology and the accessibility for the people that are hybrid as well. So it's definitely high on our list is that technical cost.
And I was looking in the chat and some said that, yeah, owls are creepy. Well, I've seen those owls and they do look like owls. It's scary.
Yeah.
When you look at them in a room, you're like, whoa. All right, Brandon.
Yeah, it real issue in the end is just equal participation, frankly. And there are a lot of things that end up attributing to it. One is just the natural human dynamic. We see it right here, right? People in this room can just get a comment in more easily. Most of the people remote are putting in the chat box. You don't hear their voice, you don't see their face. They're kind of not participating as much. Otherwise, we're doing a good job here. The AV issues definitely contribute. You can throw a lot of money at it and do better, but that's money and effort. And they know that, and they're jacking up the price. And yeah, we've purchased some equipment that we bring around with us too, like owls and some other things. But depending on the venue, and the venue contract, if the local union finds out that you brought your own AV, you might wake up at the bottom of a lake somewhere. Jokes aside, but you've been on a convention floor and like you brought your own extension board, and they'll like take it away from you. Right?
Yeah.
So that's all this stuff comes up, right? But at the end, it's just kind of a lack of equal participation.
Okay. And Peter.
Yeah, so honestly, the biggest issues for us is not really the participation, because I feel like people have leaned into figuring out the best way they want to participate, right? By doing hybrid, we found that people are more amenable to the challenges that come up because they are choosing to be in the room. They know they can be participating from their home office or their couch. So if they come to the meeting and there's like hiccups, they're like, it's not a big deal. Whereas before, if you only gave an in-person option, there were a lot of people there that were like, we could easily be doing this online, and they would be the ones that were more frustrated. I will say we look at bandwidth a lot now, a lot more than we did before. And that's one of the hard lines we deal with. Ironically, we ask for hard line connections. Like we ask for just actual drop cables in the room, so we don't have to deal with Wi-Fi issues. We run speed tests before the meeting. If there's issues, we deal with the hotel. And we also try to host meetings ourselves at AWS headquarters, right? So we've really been focusing on improving the technology there. So it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? You have a really big group. We love owls. We have, I think, like 6 of them now that the program managers have in and out at all times. But when we have big meetings, hey, just come on over to headquarters. I think you'll always find issues. And yes, it's very expensive at hotels, so we're trying to move away from it. But I think where there's a will, there's a way, and we're getting there.
Yeah, I think it's flexibility is the key in all of this. And we've same as much as we would like to have things in house, we're finding that there's competition with other departments in the house to have our conference rooms. So they're not as available as they used to be. But I'm going to go over the word cloud first, then I'll have Michelle talk about it. Those of you who have comments online. Cost is the big green, I guess not red, it's green. The big green one is cost. And yes, and again, you throw enough money at it, it will work, but then you'll be broke and you can't have any more meetings. So it's, but again, equal participation, you've heard technology, speaking over others, but that's what the mute button's for. The hotel costs, and again, and one of the things that I'm going to just mention personally is staff stress. Our days never end. You start at 6 a.m. and you're on conference calls till 10 p.m. and there's no break. And it seems like your whole day is, we'll go into the office to be on Zoom calls. I mean, it just, you're length of day is just exhausting. And we are, I see my staff, the stress level, the amount of work also, again, the challenge is the work is sped up so fast. And the expectations are so much higher to get things done quickly because we got it done quickly during COVID when nobody had anything else to do. And so now that's one of our challenges for us with having this new technology. Is good and bad, but the bad is just you're just the expectations from your employer and others to get things done quicker, faster is again is exhausting. So now the phone.
There's a lot. We travel with most of our own tech, saves on rental fees. The ability of the hotel to maintain a predetermined fixed bandwidth can be negotiated as part of your initial agreement. And it's part of our contract for standards meetings. Owls are creepy, but they're great. Owls are the best. You can link to them for a larger room. Speakerphone technology is a long way and is quite inexpensive. For meeting sizes up to 30 people to 40 people, they can be effectively used as they can be wirelessly linked. We try to do meetings in our office where we have the needed equipment, but they use owls at large meetings like their annual meeting. Sometimes we hand carry our office owl with us to the meeting. Owl audio doesn't well at the outer limits of a large meeting specs. We're testing this right now. Someone jumped in. Owl does have extension mics, but they don't work. I agree, they don't work well for large rooms. Extension mic. There's a lot of discussion on the owls here. Okay.
Take stock.
By the way, I can say that WebEx noise canceling works better than the owl noise canceling. They can't play together. Okay. We ship the majority to our meetings, microphones, computers, owls. Then there was questions on what brands are you using? We bought 2 owls. Okay. We found that we didn't necessarily get standards work done more quickly during COVID because consensus is built more effectively at in-person meetings. And that's the chat right now.
Okay. Anyone else from the room? Go ahead, Chris.
Again, Chris Dubay from NFPA. A couple of thoughts that line up. I think I'll go back to the point I made earlier about workload, right? If I think it's a flaw to assume remote participants have the same experience. So we've been very clear with our committees that it is a different experience. You are participating remotely in an in-person meeting. Because again, we're only having hybrid where there's enough work in in-person meeting. And so we've gone to owls, things like that, because of hotel bandwidth in hotel costs and things like that. We still have the meetings. We have probably 300 to 400 meetings a year. And so if we're going to be in person, we're using the best technology to give remote participants that interaction the best we can. But it's often on times in certain aspects. I think cost gets a little wonky for volunteers. If you start looking at the scale of the cost for a solid a hybrid meeting, I don't think your participants can actually afford that. You're
Right.
never, the costs are just so insane.
Yeah.
And so that's back to, again, driving, is this an in-person? Is it an all virtual meeting? The other thing that from an ANSI perspective, from an SO perspective, part of when we decide virtual or remote for that first decision is what's the balance going to look like? Because you may have, say, all the manufacturers have funding to travel, but all the government officials don't. Well, I'm not having an in-person meeting with just manufacturers because, again, there is that reality of you getting different interaction as you raised in the room. And so if we want to maintain a true consensus process, we need to make sure we have balance in participation as well.
Very good. Okay, so now I'm going to, this is just a quick, I have one fun thing we're going to do after this one. This is just a quick, do you have Zoom exhaustion? 1 to 5. Okay. Oh, some don't mind. Okay. This is up and down. Okay.
Actually, it's got nothing to do with people on the phones. That you programmed this,
I
right?
did. Okay.
That was ANSI staff, by the way, that came up with number 5. Just saying.
All right, so yeah, I'm surprised. Actually, I'm quite surprised. It's pretty across the board. My favorite is when you go to a meeting and oh, here's another one that I didn't see on here. As you age, you get visually challenged. And so when you're in a meeting and they put these things on screen, you can't see them. So people are opening their laptops and joining the Zoom meeting just so they can see what's on the. So that's another thing. So you have people on the Zoom meeting in the room because they can't read the slides on the screen. And so that's another consideration. So you have, I don't know what kind of meeting you call that, you know, it's just when everyone's in the room on the Zoom. Okay, so now here's my favorite part of the day. I want stories now, and I'm going to start with Brandon. Tell us your favorite Zoom interruption story.
Aside from seeing a guy on the toilet, as I mentioned, there was one moment actually, like I said, in our technical groups, we have a lot of engineers, and engineers get opinionated and are used to, like, you know, personal insults and stuff. It's just kind of part of the field. It's kind of shocking at joint meetings where operational people that are mostly government officials are like, you speak to me that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had one time where like a discussion was getting really, really heated, and people were starting to yell at each other over the phone and interrupt. And like, I was just about to mute everyone and say like timeouts. Because as a staff member, I have that kind of privilege.
Yes.
And all of a sudden I heard a child, like an 8-year-old boy, just scream at the top of his lungs, "No!" Like everybody like froze. There's this long silence, and everyone started laughing.
Okay.
And they cooled off,
There you
you
go.
know, and they were able to get back to work.
The power of the button and bring a child to your meeting. Okay, that's your the words of wisdom.
Brandon, that guy on the toilet, when he found out that he was on the camera, was his face flushed?
Oh, no.
It was a bunch of people actually, like single anyone out. Yeah.
Okay. Peter, tell me your story next.
Honestly, my favorites are really just the visits from the animals. Like, so many people have pets that kind of jump in, especially cats really have absolutely no regard for virtual meetings. So you'll get a whole lot of cat just taking over the screen. Recently, we did have somebody, we were in a big meeting, maybe 40 people, and the person, there was like a heated discussion. It was kind of really deep technical information. And then somebody online, I guess, was not muted, and they just go, "Oh," and everybody in the room, it really broke the room. Everybody just started cracking up, and it was a nice break. So that's the most recent one.
Shame on those pets. Okay. And next, Diana.
So do you guys remember, it was several years ago where there was I guess a lady who was on Zoom, but she was always like, she was a potato. I don't know if you remember that story. It was kind of like at the very, very beginning, right? And she couldn't figure out how to change her, her video. She had the potato face, but her eye, you could see her eyes. It was some sort of filter, right? Her kids had done on her. So anyway, for me, I had a kind of similar experience. So going back and forth between, Teams, we use Teams a lot, but then, other times we were using Zoom. And what happened to me was that every time I would get on Zoom, I would come in literally upside down. Like I would have to, present. And, when I present, I like to have my video on, and I just couldn't figure out how to change it. It took me a month or so to figure it out. There's a certain setting in there, but it was a good conversation piece to kind of kick things off, kick the meetings off, and, start everything off on like a light foot. But But yeah, that was mine. I was upside down for many, many.
I've had that happen. And then also
What?
you forget you have I've had that happen and then also you forget you have a camera and they just see your chest down and they don't see anything. So, okay, next, and last but not least, tell us your story.
So this is actually a internal TIA meeting I'll talk about rather than committee meeting, but one of my former colleagues had a roommate who worked here at Reston Zoo. And occasionally he would have to take home baby animals because they couldn't like leave them overnight. And there was, before I joined, I heard about a baby goat making its way. One day we were on a call. He says, "Hey, do you want to see a baby kangaroo? Does anybody want to see a baby kangaroo?" Yeah, we said no to that. So he turns on his camera and he has a baby kangaroo. Apparently the baby kangaroo that you have to like hold it in your like it's in the pouch. So he has this pouch and he has baby kangaroo that he's holding on to. The cutest thing I've ever seen.
All right. Anybody on this online?
Yes, sorry, back up to. I'm not sure it's the funny story, but what somebody said, I love working hybrid. I have mobility issues and it helps me to participate on more meetings. Costs are the biggest issues for getting our work groups together to collaborate on a document. We use MS Teams where we can meet on a call in real time and all work on a draft together at the same draft. It can stress the bandwidth with everyone's camera, so I asked they turn it off when we're working in the draft. Indirectly related, remote offers more flexibility and engagement for those who may lack childcare for travel, which has been helpful for employees and volunteers. Travel is often covered, but childcare is not, which often disproportionately affects younger professional women. Then there's a couple of people jumping in saying yes, and then get to see everyone's pet on the calls.
There you
It's
go.
common.
That's most important.
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to do one more. We're going to do a couple more of these questions. The next is, what do your organization's future meetings look like? And this is one that we'll give a few minutes. I know, and while we're waiting for this, on the productivity, this is a true story. Typically, in our standards organization, had about 15 standards a year. During the 2 years, we had 220 standards approved. It was because our remote participants that could not travel, suddenly they thought that virtual meeting was just great. And so they stress, again, staff stressor, we had Zoom calls constantly. But the productivity, but now it's going back to in-person. It's getting into more real life thing. So, hey, combination of all, primary virtual, primary hybrid. This is very interesting. Only 6% of in-person meetings only. Interesting, because sometimes we see that we hear the move because of the cost. We're hearing different conferences are in person now only again. So that is an interesting prediction. It's changing. Oh, there we go. Slightly. Oh, there we go. Oh, see my comments do such impact. All right. Anyone on the, nobody in the chat. Okay. All right. We're actually doing pretty good time here. All right. So what I'd like to do, okay. Can I ask one more question? We're okay on time? All right. I want thank you, panelists. I appreciate so much your input today and for sharing your experiences. But what I'd like to do is an ending before the last, while we're having our last poll, which is your takeaway from the panel, is words of advice. So I'm going to start, I'm just going to go down the line here. Brandon, what is the words of advice to our group today?
And theme with hybrid meetings, I think the most important thing is to observe how your members are the most productive and to accommodate them. We found, based on our community culture, again, I think it goes way back to everyone being used to being on audio, their eyes in a document. that the hybrid meetings just don't work for our community and standards development. And travel is the big part, same issue that NFPA has, right? Because 911 involves a lot of government officials, telecommunicators, and also a lot of companies, right? The companies have travel budgets. The dispatcher doesn't. They can't go to a meeting. So especially hybrid meetings, they get relegated like a second class, and then our balance is threatened. So it's either in person or virtual, and most of our meetings for standards development are virtual anyway.
Okay, Anna.
Yeah, so, one of the things that I guess a bit of advice that I would give, which is what we're working on right now. I know it's really scheduling what works best for the volunteers that you have that you're working with, right? For us, we're finding out that we've got, volunteers, members on our committees that are stretched very thin, right? They're doing lots of things, they're participating in a lot of things, and they can't always travel to an in-person meeting, right? Which I would love to have them travel to an in-person meeting, but they just can't. And it's not always for cost reasons, right? It could be for scheduling. It could be, I love, someone in the chat was like, it might be for daycare issues. Like, I wouldn't want to leave somebody out just because they can't find daycare, like out of that conversation, if they're, really smart and they want to participate in the meeting. So I think it's really taking a look at what the needs are of your participants in your committees, and really understand, how you could best work with everybody and get that, and get that participation that you're looking for.
Thank you. Tom?
I guess I would encourage face-to-face meetings that they do generate more productivity. We like having new standards come out and having things get updated. So encouraging them is good. And of course, hybrid is here to stay. So we just have to better at AV. So those would be my two things.
Yeah. And last and not least, Peter.
I think honestly, the key is to look not just at the way you've been doing things or your current demographic, but look at where you want to be as an organization in 10 years, in 20 years. Are you having issues recruiting volunteers? And try to just make things as easy as possible for people to participate to the level that they wish to. Because I think the more you dig in your heels on it has to be a certain way, the less you're open to where the world is going, whether that is virtual, whether that's hybrid. Just kind of find the people that are interested in these things, like the staff members that are more tech focused or that like solving problems, and lean on them to help point you in the right direction. It's been working for a lot of organizations I've seen, and just keep an open mind.
Thank you. I think from our panelists, the common theme is who's your audience, and who, again, going back to our basic principles of consensus and process and balance, that going back to standards, and what our essential agreements are, that is one of the things that's first and foremost in the minds of participants. And now I'd like to hear from our online people that we don't want to forget.
Just one comment, and committee meetings have virtual us for many years. Other association meetings are being encouraged to be face-to-face with no hybrid options, but to encourage participation.
Okay, we have one participant typing. Well, this will be, the chat will be available. So with that, we're ending right on time here. Actually, will not be keep you from lunch because maybe hungry. Those on the phone, I'm sorry, we can't offer you lunch today. But thank you for participation. You've been a great audience today and sharing your experiences with us. And I hope. Oh, thank you.